And how many of you believe in ghosts? What's the deal? Like no one on this side and everyone on this side? Just divide up as you think better? All right. How many of you do not believe in ghosts? All right. Okay. Let me tell you what the Bible says about ghosts since we're in the church. We might as well start that way, right? And I know, are there any Baptists in the room? The back rows are open if you prefer to sit there. I'm a Baptist too, and as I always tell people, that's actually the front of the church. Here's what the Bible says about ghosts. Prophet Samuel had died and was in his grave. And King Saul went to the Witch of Endor, and you all know the name Endor from Star Wars, right? He went to the Witch of Endor, and he asked the witch to summon the spirit or the ghost of the prophet Samuel. And the witch said, I can't do that. The king has prohibited it. They'll kill me. And he's like, I'm the king. It's okay. It's good to be the king. Don't worry about it. So the witch summoned the ghost of the prophet Samuel. And the ghost came up, said basically, who has disturbed my rest? And then he cursed King Saul and went back away. And King Saul the next day lost his head, literally. So the lesson of that is that there are ghosts, but it's probably not a good idea to try to call them up, okay? So we won't do any of that tonight. But what we're going to do is tell you some ghost stories, and we're going to tell you how they fit into the real history of this community. And I think you're going to find it interesting. First off, let me tell you that every house in the South older than 50 years old has a ghost in it, okay? It's like part of the deed restrictions to live in the South. Reverend Allen was 76 years old. He was in Greenwood, which is a little town a few miles north of here. And when they rang the bells for the local boys to march in to fight, there was an academy there that had a corps of cadets, much like what's now Florida State University had, at the end of the Civil War. And the cadets mounted their horses to come in to Marianna to fight. And he felt bad about all of these 12 and 14-year-old boys going off to war. And so he mounted his horse and came in with them. He wound up trapped in here and he died in the fighting. Well, the story is that Reverend Allen is still in here. They call him Frank here because, they're kind of informal. And Frank appears in here when you least expect to see him. And I will tell you about my encounter with Frank Allen. I never put much stock into this story. I thought it was one of those things. But I had a number of, I called them my LOL friends, little old lady friends, who lived around Marianna. And from my childhood, they told me about this ghost of St. Luke's. And I never thought about it. I never even really, considered it as a possibility until one day, about 3 years ago, I was here taking photographs ahead of the 100th anniversary of the church on this site. And I was doing architectural photographs of the church. I was downstairs, which the basement or cellar of the church beneath us is believed to be at least part of that is part of the original church that burned during the battle. And it's the only surviving part of that church, other than one other item I'll tell you about in a second. And so that would have been where what remained of Reverend Allen after the fire was found, was down there. So I was standing in the hallway down there taking a photograph down the hall, and there's a mirror at the far end of the hall. And in the photograph, I didn't see anything at the time, but in the photograph you see me holding the camera, taking the photograph, and over this shoulder you see an elderly man with a beard. One of his arms is very, very plain. The other one is somewhat faded. And it's like he's looking at me like, what are you doing? So after that, I was a little more open to the idea that Frank Allen might be in here somewhere. Now, buried around behind the church is a 15-year-old, she was 18 when she died, an 18-year-old lady named Maggie McClellan. And the McClellans are noteworthy for those of you from Pensacola because her father later became the circuit judge in Pensacola and is buried Her father and mother are buried at St. Michael's Cemetery in Pensacola, but Maggie is buried here alone and behind St. Luke's Church. Maggie was the victim of the first recorded drive-by shooting in Florida history. It happened in 1868, and as I like to say, it was a mule-by shooting. She was sitting on a veranda of a boarding house, and in those days you could also go have dinner. They were like restaurants combined with a place to sleep upstairs. She was sitting on the veranda of the boarding house with her father and sister and some friends. And her father was very politically involved. This is during Reconstruction, which was a very turbulent time period. And suddenly mules go by on the street. And as the mules go by, 2 guns are fired at this group of people sitting on the veranda. One of them struck her father in the shoulder. The other one struck Maggie in the heart. It killed her when she was 18 years old. The story is that Maggie haunts this home over here because she's looking for her family that moved away from her. And so she supposedly can be seen roaming this section of sidewalk or the front yard of that house or here in the cemetery at night. And people have described a white figure of an 18-year-old woman walking around here along the edges of the street late at night. And so if you happen to be driving through here later and see someone standing out here, you know, say hello to Maggie McClellan. She's kind of our roaming ghost of Marianna.
You're right.
Drive-by shoeing, that's good.
Yeah, I noticed you blame it on her dad.
That kind of stuff, yeah.
She was telling me they looked a lot alike.
They kind of do, actually.
I'm going to tell you about a home that is actually across the street. And you see this home over here that the front is illuminated? That's the Holden house. The Holden house is haunted. I had an office in there for a while. And basically the story of this ghost is that it's a playful ghost. This ghost likes to move things around and hide your stuff. It will take your stuff from your desk and move it to someone else's desk or put it in someone's desk drawer or whatever. And we would come in every morning and have to go searching for our staplers and our pens and our chairs. We'd come in and all the office chairs would be rearranged. And you know how it is, if you worked in an office, everyone has their chair and you better not mess with it, you know? Well, the ghost would come in and move all the chairs around at night. And so it was a very playful ghost. We don't know who it was, but it's kind of a neat story. And it's now a day spa. And I asked the folks in there if they still encounter this thing. And they're like, oh, it happens all the time. My stuff is always put up. I'm like, well, you know, let me tell you what's going on here. It's a neat old home. I was giving a tour on the Battle of Marianna once, and I reached a point along in here and I said, any questions? And the lady raised her hand and I said, yes ma'am. And she said, was anyone hurt in Pizza Hut during the fighting?
No.
I just said, no, you know, everyone came through it fine, and just kept on going. This is a beautiful Victorian home. This home was built long after the Battle of Marianna, but what it does have a connection. There are a couple of different ghost stories about the house. One is that you can see a figure looking out the window at you even when the house is not occupied. The other one is that you hear piano music coming from the house at night. Now, I've never heard this, and I'll let the owners tell you whether they have or not, but the story is that people passing by on the sidewalk, you know, will hear the sounds of the lady playing her piano here. So I'm going to let you step up on the porch. You'll have to take your shoes off. And then they will be happy to tell you a little about the home and show you around. So, there you go.
And the highball is a copy, reproduction, as well as these pieces here.
Wait till they come down, or is it okay?
And this sofa here is a
Looks like Bonnie, but I wonder if that's Bonnie's mother.
This house is the most battle-scarred private dwelling in the state of Florida. And in a minute, I'll take you up on the porch and I'll show you all the bullet holes in the front of the house from the battle that was fought all out in here where you're standing. Finally, this is a noted haunted mansion of Marianna. This is the home of the Lady in Blue. And every town has a lady dressed in something, okay? So remember that when you choose your wardrobe. You know, this lady, and remember I told you earlier there are no plain or homely people in ghost stories or legends. This lady was the most beautiful woman that anyone had ever seen, okay? And she was a house servant here, not during slavery times, but during later days. And she always wore a beautiful blue formal dress to greet visitors to the home. Anyway, years later, when I was a little boy, I would come here, and two wonderful little my LOL friends lived here, and they would give us butter knives to come outside and dig musket balls out of the wall for fun. And I still have one, and we would do that. Well, they always told me, be careful on the staircase. You don't want to get scared by the Lady in Blue. And so that was actually one of the first ghost stories I heard growing up here in this area. After they passed away, the house was restored, and different people have lived in it through the years. Every one of them, without knowing this story, when we went back and checked, has seen the figure of a woman in blue in the house. There was a standard poodle, and have you seen these great big poodles, named Bo? And Bo was terrified of this ghost. And any time that, according to their theory, the ghost was around, Bo would suddenly start shaking and droop his tail between his legs and start crying. And anyway, this particular night, Bo starts to follow Ruth down the stairs. He comes out of the door, and Larry, the gentleman, immediately hears Bo whining and crying. So he gets up to go see what it is, and he said as he came around the door into the central hallway, there stood this lady. And he said she was visible from about here up, very faded, but she looked as surprised as him to see someone there. And he said he blinked his eyes like that and she was gone. But after that, every time Bo would start to shake like that, they realized the ghost was about in the house. And she's still in there. And we think that she likes it a lot when they're not here, because it's her domain and she has full roam of the house. But when they are gone, when they come back, she gets disturbed because there's people in her space. You know how that is, you know. It's like having company that comes and stays for 6 months. In Marianna, we're very creative. And this is the 1840 house because it was built in 1840, okay? Can you look at this column in the front? Do you notice anything about it compared to the house we just visited? The columns are the exact same pattern of what we just saw. The reason for that is this was one of the wings of that house at one point. This was the bedroom wing of the house. The house that we just saw was at one point the largest home in the state of Florida. This was the bedroom wing. It was originally turned around to face the Lafayette Street or the main street and connected to the house by a breezeway. And on the other side there was an identical structure like this that was the kitchen and servants' quarters of the house. And when the kitchen area burned in the early 20th century, they turned this around and converted it into a separate residence. Later it became apartments for students attending Chipola College here, and today it's a business office. This house at one point held an antique shop, and Carlotta Peterson, and then some of you may remember Pete Peterson, who was a congressman from Florida. He and his wife operated an antique shop here. And Carlotta used to tell me that people were constantly walking around and whispering when she was at work here. And that all through the house she would hear, especially late in the day when the house quieted down, what sounded like people going about their normal lives. Just kind of shuffling around, getting ready for bed, walking up and down the halls, moving around the bedrooms. And she believed that there were numerous ghosts in the house. And you don't tell a congressman's wife she's wrong, right? You know. So it definitely has some significance along the lines of what she was describing, because this entire structure was once bedrooms for the other house. And in those days, when your kids got married, you moved them in, and when your grandkids got married, you moved them into, and everybody lived in the same house, if you can imagine that. If you can imagine living one wall away from your grandparents your entire life, that's what life would have been like here. It's an interesting place. Now, let me tell you a little bit about where we're going next. You see the mansion through the trees here? This is the RUSS house. The RUSS house is the most famous haunted house in Florida. It's also our tourist information. This is the Joseph Russ house. This house looks like an antebellum mansion, right? But it was not. This house is actually a Victorian home. It originally looked very similar to the yellow house that you toured earlier in the tour. However, Mr. Russ was single when he built the house. And I'm going to tell you a few things about the house before we go inside. Since there's so many of us, it would just be a jumble in there. The ghost story behind this house is this. In 1929, we had an event called the Great Depression, and the stock market collapsed. Mr. Russ was enamored of New York. As you will see when you go inside, each room has a different design, mantel, and fireplace, but they were all coal burning, which was very unique for this area of the South at that time. But he wanted the house to capture the feel of being in New York when you were in it. During the days of the Great Depression, was heavily invested in the stock market. He lost everything. And so he went to the bank here to see about obtaining a bank loan. And they said, we'd love to help you, but we don't have any money. He offered to put up all the rest of the property. He offered everything he could. And they said, we just don't have the money to loan. And so he wrote a suicide note, attached it to his life insurance policy, which did not include a suicide rider, and basically said, I'm doing this for the integrity of the family, and he shot himself. The legend of the Russ house is that Mr. Russ is still here, looking over his home. We've brought different groups in. Let me tell you a little bit about what they've seen and heard here. We have one group of, you all have seen paranormal investigator types on TV. We brought in one of those groups, and they come regularly. They hear sounds, they hear crying in the house, they hear footsteps, they get weird shadows, photographs of, and weird heat signatures moving around in the house. They believe there could be as many as 6 ghosts in here, which if I lived here, I'd probably hang around too, you know. Other people have taken photographs here. One was taken right about where we're standing, and in the window on your left on the ground floor, at the time the house was abandoned and unoccupied, there's a little old lady peering through the blinds there, looking out, and it's a very vivid, clear photograph. During electrical storms, people will take photographs and streaking balls of light appear in them. What they are, I don't know. You know, I've taken them, and they're very vivid, and you will take a series of photographs and you'll actually see it moving across the room and in that entire series of photographs. The elevator does weird things, not just getting stuck. It will, before you push the button for it to open, it will open for you. 2 years ago, the walls of the house started bleeding on the second floor. We never did figure out what caused it. And as you tour around, if you'll take a glance in the upstairs men's restroom, you can still see a little bit of it on the wall there. We don't know what it was.
Going to the men's room. Okay.
Yeah. We do not know. We do not know. The Chamber of Commerce is also located in this building along with our tourism agency. And the lady sat and watched one day as a Coke slid all the way across her desk right in front of her. I've been in there volunteering when I'd be the only one in the house, and I'd hear someone walking around upstairs. And I thought, okay, maybe someone came in the front door I didn't see from my office. So I'd go upstairs and look, no one up there. But as soon as I'd get upstairs, I'd hear them walking around downstairs. And I'd decide, you know, my volunteer hours are over for the day. Photographs, when we brought groups through, they've taken photographs. and a strange shadow will appear in with the group as they're touring the house. And we've not been able to explain it. It will literally look like the shadow of a person, but it will appear like if I'm standing here talking to you, it'll appear right here, just like the person is along for the tour. So there are some really creepy stories about this place. Now there's something unique about this house, and let me show it to you. You guys can stay here, you're fine. Look at this door.
Pocket door. You want to talk about a big pocket?
Look at this.
That's a big pocket.
This goes all the way across. This is the heaviest door you'll ever meet. Each of the fireplaces, you'll notice, has a different style of facing and mantle on it all the way through the house. Each room was designed that when that room was closed off, that when the room was open, it would flow through the house. When the room was closed off, it had its own kind of identity. And this room was naturally darker, so they went with darker wood. This room was very bright. They went with a brighter looking, fireplace. They say that Mr. Russ hangs around upstairs, along with whoever else may be in the house. I was asking, is Christy, where did she go? Christy, I asked Christy, is fairly new with us as our tourism director, and I just asked her if she's met the ghost yet, and she said,
Went out the door, turned the knob, it would not budge. And the door, I checked the locks, I was like, well, maybe she locked it up thinking I was going out the back door, which I never do. And I checked the lock, it was fine, locked it, unlocked it, it still would not budge. And we actually had the paranormal group come that Saturday, and they said they had the same issues with the door. It would not open.
It fascinates me, the people who come here come from around the world. We have many, many people from Asia and Germany and France who come through and stop here. And it is a really neat place to stop. I'm going to let you kind of roam on your own. Get your cell phones out. When you get upstairs, two things you need to do. Take photographs and take a lot of them. And I'll see you tomorrow. I want to know what shows up in those photographs, okay? And the other thing is make sure that you come to the front of the upstairs hallway and look up. And you'll see why I'm telling you to do that when you get there, okay? So, because one of the legends of the house is that you can see Mr. Russ in the tower looking out. And I want you to see for yourself what makes that such a fantastic story. So, you can either take the secret staircase in the back or the main staircase in the front, depending on what kind of person you are. And enjoy yourselves. I've enjoyed giving you a tour. I'll see you again tomorrow, and let me know what you find, okay?
Thank you.
The moon had climbed the highest hill that rises over the source of deep, and from her eastern summit shed her silvery light over tower and tree.